Hi, everyone. Let me introduce you to Harrison for today's event.
Fantastic. Well, welcome and thank you for joining us today. Our live stream is COVID-19, the impact on our events industry. And we're really excited for our conversation today and some great speakers that we have who are going to be talking about how they're doing in this crazy and unprecedented time. I'm your host, Harrison Womack, owner and founder of New Fathom IT, and also a proud board member for City Club. And we want to just first extend a thanks to our platinum sponsors, Brooks Resources and St. Charles Health Systems. Without their support and the support of our other annual sponsors, we simply wouldn't be able to do our event today and our live stream. We're truly in unprecedented times, and temporarily, City Club is moving from our live gatherings to a completely online and free to the public events. So if you would consider sponsoring a conversation, we would greatly appreciate it. That would help us to continue to provide the conversations of consequence that matter to our region. And we're adjusting to this new normal, so please continue to tune in, and we'll continue to host great content. Also want to extend a special thanks to Matt Hand and Hand in Hand Productions. They are fantastic. Hey, Matt. And a couple weeks ago, we reached out to Matt, and he just totally rolled up his sleeves and said, let's do it. Let's make this happen. And also a special thanks to Scot Brees for kicking this off 2 weeks ago. So thanks, Scott. Thank you guys for all you're doing in the community. Also, how to ask questions today. Write this number down. It's going to be the way that you can ask questions of any of the panelists. It's 541-728-3304. Once again, that's 541-728-3304. Unfortunately, just with limited bandwidth today, we can't be moderating the Facebook and YouTube and all those. So if you want to ask a question, that's the only way that you can do it. So joining me today for our conversation, we have Matt Hand, owner of Hand in Hand Productions. We have David Lenke, the general manager of the Riverhouse on the Deschutes. And we have Carrie Douglas, owner and founder of Cascade Relays and The Haven. And we also have Scot Brees, executive director, Connect Oregon, as well as Courtney Latham, owner of Flip Flop Sounds. So, panelists, I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves and tell us about your business, BC, which is before coronavirus, and tell us what your experience was like with your business before everything canceled. And please describe your experience the day our governor announced the stay-at-home executive order. So, Matt, let's start with you.
Thanks, Harrison. Well, so I'm basically a video production guy, but I do a lot of events. So when things started unfolding, the day that sort of announcements were made that no more events were going to happen, it was sort of a really difficult situation. I actually remember contacting Courtney actually at probably literally almost the same time that we were hearing for the first time. And so that first day was it was a rough one. I will say that it took me probably 2 or 3 days to sort of be like, okay, I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen here. I it's resources and resourcefulness that have sort of allowed me to continue to work, give back to the community in whatever way I can. But yeah, it was really tough. And then essentially the second, when the governor announced that, hey, we got to stay at home, I'm like, well, this is going to be really interesting. And so I'm recently single, and so for me, it's sort of a life change also. And so, but the reality is we're doing this for the right reason, but it still hasn't, necessarily made it easy by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't want to say that I'm fortunate, but I unfortunately am fortunate, unfortunate, however you look at it, because I have this broadcast background and I have this, so I basically built a network operations center in my house. And that's sort of what I've been doing for a lot of people, is basically using some of those broadcast skills to do what we're doing right now. So I've been fortunate from that standpoint. But yeah, the very first day that it was announced was not a good day at all. So that's it for me, Harrison.
Yeah. All right. Well, Carrie, let's have you go next.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Hi,
oh, there you are, Katie.
Oh, can you hear me? Yeah, so gosh, my husband and I are extra lucky because we own two small businesses that have been pretty decimated by COVID-19. We own Cascade Relays, which produces two of the largest running events in Central Oregon, Cascade Lakes Relay and Ben Beer Chase, and then a number of pro bono events like the I Like Pie Thanksgiving Run, Ronald McDonald House, Striped Sock Walk, and events like TEDx Ben and TEDx Women. And then we also own The Haven, a brand new 11,000 square foot co-working and event space that we opened exactly 6 months ago. So gosh, the day of the governor's order, I think we were just in shock. I mean, we've owned Cascade Relays for 12 years, so that company is a little better able to weather the storm. But we put every dollar we have and more into building The Haven. And so to have it come to a grinding halt 10 months later, it was shocking and scary and hard. And I think, luckily we have two toddler daughters. And so I've watched Frozen 2 several times in the last few weeks. And my mantra right now is just to do the next right thing.
Sorry, that was my fault. Something happened. Sorry, Harrison. Go ahead.
Oh,
yeah, sorry.
Scot,
that was my.
Scot, let's have you introduce yourself next.
That was bizarre. Sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure exactly what happened there.
So good.
I'm Scott Brees. I've got a broadcast background, but most recently, most people would know me from either some of the youth robotics events here in Central Oregon, or as a technology assistant to many of the other events, including many that Matt and Carrie run and Courtney run. My business, Connect Central Oregon, is a career technical ed program for broadcast and event production, and we partner with the OSU Cascades Innovation Collab. And as about a year ago, we embarked on a project with OSU to build a small studio for training, supporting, and promoting other entrepreneurial activities, or specifically being able to do quick things like Kickstarter videos and so forth. We were impacted directly as a result of the campuses, the public campuses being closed. And our studio that had taken almost a year to get up and running at university speed, if you will, was suddenly up and running, and client and event after event was being put on the books, and it came to an absolute grinding halt. The second thing is the irony is, after having partnered with the university, many of the orders that have now gone for the universities to provide distance learning and distance teaching, innovative teaching, that's the very grant that allowed us to get many of our programs in place, and yet we were considered non-essential to campus operations, and therefore we were shut down. So that's the BC side. We were helping out, and our program finally got up and running after a great deal of time getting prepared to run, and was almost in an instant turned off. We'll cover some other things since then that we've had to do to adapt, and the favorite word right now, of course, is pivot.
Mm-hmm. All right, and Courtney, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Courtney Latham. I'm the owner of Flip Flop Sounds, and we do weddings and concerts and corporate AV and all that kind of fun stuff. And prior to BC, we were rolling into what was going to be an amazing month of working with some bigger events in Central Oregon, Hella Big Air, Subaru Winterfest, Rendezvous, and working with some amazing artists and large gatherings, as well as a handful of weddings. April was a month that we had been planning for and looking forward to since roughly November, December. So when the news came out of everything being shut down and the scaling down and all the things, to be honest, with the time of night that it was announced, I think it was somewhere in the 9:30, 10 o'clock range. I did not sleep well that night, and was definitely a feeling that I had never experienced before. Being in the event industry, you see things coming a long ways out. You're scheduling a year and a half, 2 years out. You're planning 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks in advance. And to have all things just e-break and stop and nothing happening the next day was something that I was not prepared for. It's been a definite humbling experience, a stressful experience, and I have learned a lot of new coping mechanisms to get through this. So,
Nice, thank you, David. Why don't you tell us about yourself and kind of what your experience was?
Thank you. My name is David Lenke. I'm the general manager at the Riverhouse Hotel and Convention Center, where we get to see a lot of you every month, and we appreciate that. And, prior to everything, we were moving right along. March was supposed to be a record month for us, I think, the hotel and meeting side. We were 90% booked out, and I know we were going to be working with Courtney and Matt quite a bit, and it's really sad and disappointing that we don't get to. But we had an industry event going on, conference, and about 2 days later after that conference ended, that's when the first order came out of no meetings over 50 people or greater. And that it put a grinding halt to everything. The next morning after that, I had to instruct my sales team to stop answering their phone, because every phone call or every email they were taking, it was cancellation after cancellation. And I would say within a 48-hour time period, spanning 2 months worth of bookings, we probably lost $2.5 million worth of revenue when it came to room revenue and meetings, just right out the window. And then you fast forward, to the stay-at-home order, it's gotten, significantly worse. And, learning to pivot and adapt and try to make it work. So that's where we're kind of sitting right now.
Yeah. So for you guys with the events, how far out have your cancellations extended? Like, do you have events that are planned for June, July? Like, how far out are people actually planning on doing something?
I know in our case at the convention center, we've had groups as far out as August cancel at this point in time. And I know, talking to some of my industry colleagues out at Bersada, Sun River, they've had events, similar time frame, July, August. I think there's a couple that have extended into the fall as well.
We're seeing everything through March and April is gone. We've got a couple of events that are trying to hang tough towards the end of May. But as far as beyond that, everybody's hanging tough, hoping that things change and hoping that they can go forward. We've had a couple of weddings further out in the June, July, August that have canceled. Generally, it trickles back to a financial impact where they don't have a job. The fiance doesn't have a job, and they're not sure they'll be able to pay for it. And so they're rescheduling things into 2021 already. So.
Gotcha. So what does it look like for you guys as you are adjusting your business to this model for now? Like, what is a hopeful date or a realistic date that you think, even if the ban is lifted at the end of April, I think people will still be a little hesitant to start gathering, quickly after that. So in your business planning, what does that look like for survival? Like, what are you anticipating?
I'll start with that one. I think we're anticipating a little bit of cabin fever and pent up, right? So we have threefold to it. We have the hotel, the restaurant, and the convention center. Things that we'll put in place is we'll reduce capacity in the restaurant. We won't fully seat everybody, because I'm sure some people will still be a little apprehensive about sitting super close to a stranger that they don't know. So we'll work on some of that and continue some of the social distancing, or physical distancing, as I like to say, instead of social distancing there. But I'm hopeful that we're really going to see, travel start up again Really, sometime late May is, I think, what we're anticipating as an industry. Some places a little bit sooner, depending on, each individual state or bands. But I think here in Central Oregon, we'll start to see June-ish for that time frame.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of the same stuff. We're hearing larger gatherings postponing May and even most of June, with the hopes that July will be back to the races. But right now, everybody's, it's all anticipation and looking at modeling and hoping. But I agree with David. There's a definite pent up desire to get out and do something. And in my world, music is a great healer. Every time there's a big natural disaster, there's a big gathering, fundraiser, music type thing to help the community come together, to heal, to raise money. And I think in this case, it's going to be the same. And the sooner we can get to that point and start the healing and the moving forward and the coming back together, everybody's hopeful and anxious that that's sooner than later, all things being safe.
Yeah, it's the unknowns that are so much more difficult about this crisis compared to something like a flood that there's a time you will rebuild and move forward. There's so much unknowns about how this could continue to flare or change until there's a vaccine. And so I feel like we have a contingency plan and then 5 contingency plans after that, knowing that this could be, reasonably back to normal by June and we could be able to produce the bin beer chase, or that things could look different for 12 to 18 months. So we're really just right now trying to build community with both of our businesses. That's what our entire industry is about, right? And I've seen a meme going around that basically says, if you didn't think supporting the arts was important before, can you imagine being quarantined without movies, books, or music? And I'm hopeful that this pandemic will make us all similarly appreciate events. I know sometimes in Central Oregon, people like to complain about too many events or too much noise or too much traffic. And we're just really hoping that we'll come out of this experience, whenever it ends, really grateful for community gatherings and maybe even grateful for noise and traffic, and recognizing that events are really the fabric of this community in many ways.
That's really good. What would you guys say? What is your biggest challenge day to day? Carrie, you already mentioned the unknowns. I think that's probably a big challenge. Like, who knows what the next thing is going to be that's announced? Hopefully it can't get any more locked down. But on a daily basis, what would you guys say is your biggest challenge?
I think the Riverhouse, for us, it's not knowing what's going to happen with future group reservations or transient and trying to plan for that. But also day-to-day needs. We just don't know what's going to happen, over the course of the day, and who we're going to need the next day. And, it hurts and it's painful because we don't get to see our staff and we don't get to bring them into work. And it's painful for us. We miss them dearly and we want them to come back soon.
Yeah, I think. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
So I think for me, I think the hardest part. I mean, obviously, I don't have a team. So for me, it's just this emotional. Hey, I just got to keep moving. That's the, being in the event business. All I could echo David on that. I mean, we are this big, huge collective family, and we are missing that big, huge collective family. I mean, when I walk into the Riverhouse, when Courtney walks into the Riverhouse, I mean, there's a bunch of people there that greet us by name, and we're incredibly friendly. And I think that is one of the hardest parts right now, is it's just that missing the family component. And so just walking through that day to day of just knowing that, I do have some of these people, like I call Courtney every day, and we check in and just make sure that, he's doing okay. And he, checks in to make sure I'm doing okay. And so I think that's part of, getting through this, but it's definitely what, part for me has just been, making sure that I've got that family in place. Courtney?
Yeah, and for me, it's definitely part of the unknown and what is coming next, and not being able to plan because you don't know. I've had lots of little projects I want to do around the warehouse, and as I come in, it's both rejuvenating to see the gear and see the stuff and go, okay, this is the thing that we built and the stuff that we're going to go do again at the same point in time. When it just sits in its cases in the racks, it's like, all right, this kind of sucks. So it's definitely a dual-edged sword. Trying to stay motivated, trying to stay moving forward. But as this office has gotten more and more hectic over the years, with more and more employees and doing quite a few more events, it's weird to be here and have there be no traffic and no phones ringing and just the silence of it all is a little odd at times and hard to process. And so you just kind of keep trying to look forward to, hey, when this does transition, we got to get back to the races and be ready to roll.
Mm-hmm.
Harrison, you and I have talked about this before. Our background is similar in the sense of, from an IT perspective and working with and managing remote teams, the use of tools like Skype, like Google Hangouts, or now Zoom as the product, Teams for Microsoft. These have been in use in our world forever. And in order to keep connected with remote teams, and of course to keep us working 24/7, of course. So it's funny. One of the things I've heard the most from businesses that have suddenly found themselves moving to keep the planning and keep the momentum going is they're new to having to have that connection virtually. And for us, or for many of us that have been doing this, it's like, whatever. It's like I'm seeing you on the screen now versus the phone versus in person. But those hallway conversations are about how 50% of planning and work really do happen. We talk about project planning all the time. We talk about products and tools that we use all the time. But let's just be clear: it's casually meeting in a hallway or at dinner, at a bar, at a school, at an event, or whatever. That's where about 50% of the connections, the planning, the referrals happen that turn into not only the business but the decisions. And I'm thinking, in many ways, I'm a hired gun. Like, I don't respond until people need me, but because I don't have a venue, I can snap and respond at a moment's notice to help out. The City Club, great example. The event you were running at Riverhouse, the standard plated lunch and panel, was canceled, and 24 hours later, we had it up, or we had a version of it spun up online. And of course, very little participation as people came online. But here we are, 4 weeks later, and there's a virtual event happening, but it still took multiple days of planning even to just get us coordinated. So you forget also about that planning that normally happens on the day-to-day, that you have to have tools to be able to do it, and you have to stay connected with those tools and with those people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
One of the things that's so unique about the event industry, I mean, like, this crisis is hitting every person imaginable. Every time I think to myself, oh, I bet that industry is doing okay, then I talk to someone in that industry and there's some consequence for them as well. But the interesting thing about the event industry is that, all small businesses struggle with cash flow and having a reserve. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the data going around that the average small business has something like 27 or 28 days of cash on hand. That's true for us as well. But the thing that's interesting about the event industry is that you don't tend to take in revenue until there's actually an event. And so our revenue is already, really up and down and cyclical. But we always have our overhead and our labor and all of the expenses associated with just having a company. And so I think it's been incredibly hard to lay people off and to figure out how to plan for the future. Do we put in a t-shirt order that's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars for an event that may or may not happen? Those decisions are just really hard to make right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are tuning in, please feel free to send us a text message at 541-728-3304. Once again, 541-728-3304. So what is something, as you guys have been in this, that has been pleasantly surprising, or something that you've been thankful for that maybe you wouldn't have got to appreciate before everything got canceled? Has there anything stand out to you that surprised you but was actually kind of a cool thing?
I'm going to jump back in and on this. having been working with online tools, video conferencing and so on, that has been slow to adopt from those that aren't within the tech industry, the fact that everybody is talking about them and everybody is using them, I, for one, welcome our new video overlords.
Nice.
Harrison, is this in capacity to just like in general things that have surprised us about the community, or just within our profession?
I think any of those. I think there's just, I know I've been struck by just people coming together and wanting to help each other. And that's been a really cool thing to see that I think was always there, but the community didn't have an opportunity to express themselves. And so that was one thing, but in general or specific or, personally or regards to your business, any of those.
Don't everyone go at once. I guess, for me, I've been in this weird, again, it's a strange panel for me to sit on because I'm sitting in a room full of people that they don't have a lot of work right now. And I have decided to use my skills as a broadcaster to benefit the community. And that's been the kind of the neatest thing is to see some of the community, just the true community coming together. I know, and I get a sense that community is so important in this community, literally, that I think, at least I hope that at least for us in the event business, those that are pouring into this same collective community, I think are going to see that on the back end as well. And it's just such I guess for me to go through my day and know that there are people that are, will text you or say, hey, how you doing? Or, that sort of thing, just checking in on you, that didn't really happen before. So that I think has been sort of a positive thing, definitely, that's come out of it for sure.
Yeah, I would say within, the wedding industry and that we work as well as the concert side, there's a lot of people that you see 5, 10, 12 times a year. You may work with them 3 or 4 times a year, your acquaintances, your friends, you work together, you love to get along, but you don't necessarily have a lot of ongoing contact. And kind of what this has done is brought us all really well, or brought us more together. Particularly there's the Central Oregon Wedding Association we're part of, to where all the members are chiming in and helping and saying, hey, have you seen this? And do you know about this? And what are we doing in this? And so there's been that camaraderie of all of us really coming together more. And then as well as I think there's a lot of people that are already starting to look towards when this is done, what are we going to do to help things out? And so I've had some conversations with some people on donating services and trying to come up with things, for instance, like high schoolers and the seniors not getting to have their senior prom and stuff like that. And just trying to find a way to give back to the people that have missed out on so much, and definitely those high school years and weddings and things like that. How can we help make some of this happen once we get out of there? And there's a lot of planning and things going on behind the scenes, which is really cool to see.
Well, obviously, one positive has been fun Zoom backgrounds.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, Central Oregon is such a special place, and I think we all knew that before. And like anything else, a crisis, brings out the best in good people and perhaps the worst in some people, but the best in people by far. And watching our community and sectors come together, especially to support local small businesses, I'll admit, as much as anyone, I had gotten pretty lazy about ordering most stuff on Amazon. And this crisis has totally changed my buying habits. I'm now ordering everything possible from local businesses, and I think that will last. And so to watch, people reach out and support each other, I'm often amazed. The people who seem to give the most during a crisis like this are often the people that don't even have the most. Our Haven members, many of whom have either lost their job or lost significant revenue, they're still saying to us, hey, we'll pay $25 a month, we'll pay $50 a month, something, just to keep some revenue coming in. And that means the world to us that, people that are suffering are still passing it on. And then we just turn around and try to pass it on to the next organization. So I think it brings out the best in Central Oregon.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, it's very cool to see people in this light respond positively. You do see some people responding negatively, unfortunately, and the worst in some people does come out. But how have you seen? So, especially, all of you guys are dealing with contracts, and those contracts were significantly adjusted by a legal order. How have you guys dealt with that? I mean, I know that basically everyone I've had business with that's like, hey, I'm in a tough spot, we got to cancel that. Like, how have you guys dealt with that? How have you seen other people respond to that? Like a landlord that you owe rent to, like, how has that worked out?
Yeah, it definitely seems like the government mandates so far have been a little uneven. So when they decide that, for example, on Airbnb, all renters were able to cancel all trips that they had planned for free, but that means that landlords took the hit. Or, if you're able to break contracts for free, that's great for the organization or company that was trying to produce an event, but not good for the event producer. And so, I guess to my earlier point, I have to hope that the full circle, that everyone is going to be kind to each other, because, I still have to pay my rent unless my landlord gives me relief. And if he doesn't give me relief, then I've still got to charge my members rent. And it just keeps getting passed down the line. I would love for the federal government to just halt all debt for 60 days. So everything could just stop. But yeah, in the meantime, at the Haven and Cascade Relays, we've lost all of our events, and we didn't charge any cancellation fees to anyone. And so at this point, we take the full hit unless someone on the back end decides to give us relief.
Yeah, I would echo what Carrie's saying. At this point, we're letting people, we've let some people out of some contracts. There was a big argument right away coming out. Typically, there's an impossibilities clause or a force majeure clause in ours, and I don't want to get into the legal ramifications of all that, but it's, look, we're going out on good faith, and what we've seen a lot of groups come back and do is rebook for a later time frame down the road. I think if there's flexibility shown by one party, then someone else is more likely to help, chip back in and say, sure, we'll rebook with you. It might not be this year, but let's rebook early next year and see if we can help, your first quarter next year or later this year happen.
Echoing one thing really quick, and I was Matt sort of brought something up a moment ago too about some of the services that each one of us are giving away for free, if you will, both in terms of community or the give backs. It truly is based on the expectation and the hope that you're going to be able to make it up on the back end. Many of us I'm in a pretty good position right now, though I've lost access to the studio and all the resources. In my particular case, I brought equipment, literally loaded my car with a great many of the pieces of equipment, and having worked at many of the events at many of your locations, we've been able to step up or stand up little mini studios. And what you may have seen at Pub Talk or at other events at the Riverhouse, we can't run these full events, but we can at least bring some quick ones up online. And the hope is that long term, much like they were just saying about the Riverhouse, that people are going to come back. And secondly, the hope is that they're going to come back and expand the services, because they're also learning about something that they were forced into that may expand their ability to do their next event, or expand their functionality, or bring in a keynote speaker remotely where they had never even thought of that as a possibility before.
Yeah. Sure. I think a lot of businesses are just never going to go back. So there's going to be a live streaming component to a lot of these events. And I think that's a good thing. Courtney, did you want to add something?
Oh, I was just going to say that we've been pretty fortunate on the wedding side. We've only had a few cancel. And so if obviously it's happening during this, we've been doing all that we can to refund in that. A lot of rescheduling and postponements, which has been nice to where we can just roll things forward, and people are getting on the ball early to make sure that their dates are secure. So whether that's in September of this year or February of next year, and then some of our bigger event partners have been pretty generous and flexible with us on things. And so it really is just all about communication and working with all of your customers and trying to do the best that you can. Obviously, finances play a part, and to Carrie's point, none of us are exactly sitting on a gold mine, and so some things may get delayed and some things may get pushed out of touch. But definitely working to do all that we can to be good stewards in the event industry and look to move forward as best we can.
Nice. As you guys are doing these events, and you're in touch with performers or presenters, how have you seen performers impacted and presenters impacted by this?
I know early on the corporate AV side, we had some customers who, in the early days of all this, they weren't letting their keynote speakers travel, and so we helped with some web conference type deals with Mr. Hand to make that happen, kind of combine forces. And then beyond that, really, it's just the lockdown through May at this point. Other concerts and things we work with, they've got June dates, they've got July dates, and they're all staying put at this point. So again, everybody's hopeful and hoping that we come out of this, because to your point, I mean, it not only is the concert promoter, it's the artist, it's the label, it's the management, it goes up and up and up to where if a concert's not happening, there's a whole lot of people not making money. So everybody's just hopeful and not canceling until they absolutely have to.
That's good. Yeah, so we did have some comments on Facebook that some landlords are giving away half their rent until this passes. I think that's cool to see that. And then there's people doing virtual, live streaming weddings. So interesting ways that people are adapting to all this. But on kind of a negative side, have you guys already seen businesses that are saying they're not going to be reopening, that this is going to hit them too hard, or or do you see most are going to be able to weather the storm, or is that kind of, I don't know, what's been your experience?
I think it's too early to tell. I've seen one, as someone who was born and raised in Bend, Pilot Butte drive-through has already announced that they won't be reopening after the crisis, but I think that might have been in the works a little bit anyway. But, we're only 2 weeks into this. It's hard to remember that. It feels like 2 years. And, I think most small businesses can weather 2 weeks. I think, most of us are taking every measure. We're asking our debtors for relief. We're cutting expenses. We're laying people off. And so maybe that buys us another month. And then, maybe we get an SBA loan and that buys us another couple of months. But, so I think I generally hear optimism. Still, people believe that we will figure out a way. Entrepreneurs, that's what we do, right? We're gritty and we just keep figuring out the next thing and the next way. But I have no doubt if this continues beyond much more than 2 or 3 months, we will see beloved businesses close. And we haven't really talked much about the recession that's going to follow. The event industry relies on some discretionary dollars. Like, people find events to be really important in their lives, but when they've got to cut their personal expenses, a lot of events suffer. And so, my biggest fear is that we will continue to be hit, beyond when physical distancing ends, that we'll feel the long-term effects of this recession.
Yeah, definitely the longest March ever. I feel like it still is going, but locally haven't heard much in my industry thus far. I've heard some unsubstantiated rumors within the fair industry and some of the vendors for fairs, not necessarily in Oregon, but West Coast, that may not be returning after this. I haven't been able to verify that independently, but that's some of what I've heard, to where some of the numbers are already starting to drop of companies that have said the loss is too great, or the relief isn't fast enough, and they're just not able to make it through it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens after 2 more weeks. I think I definitely echo that, Courtney. It's been the longest 2 weeks like ever. So what are you guys doing with employees? How have you been keeping them safe during this? Have you gone to completely quarantines, or are you still doing any kind of in-person meetings?
Unfortunately, at this point, I had to lay everybody off last week. I tried to hold out, but the distance was too long, and my biggest concern, frankly, was trying to keep everybody that I had on health benefits employed. We were able to get the health benefits carried through, so I at that point kind of had to pull the trigger and lay off everybody. So it was probably one of the worst moments of my life.
Yeah, here at the Riverhouse, we've done a few things. It's funny, you walk into our hotel lobby, we have tape in our lobby that's spaced 6 feet apart. So that way, for the handful of people that we do have that are passing through check-in, or while Currents was open, doing takeout and curbside, people knew where to stand, in appropriate relation to each other. But like Courtney, we've furloughed. We normally run 200, 220 employees this time of year, and I think I'm down to 12 or 13 right now. Everybody else is on furlough with, the anticipation that, hey, maybe we're one of those that get lucky enough to get one of those SBA loans that will allow us to pay our employees to, come back and do some work. But for those that we do have that have the ability to work remotely, we have them work remotely, and we do Zoom meetings or conference calls instead of in-person stuff. And when it comes to our housekeeping department, for both our guests and employees, we have a very detailed cleaning process that basically goes through and disinfects and sanitizes each room every time it's used from head to toe.
So, David, just a little follow-up question on that. Being in the hotel industry, how much business do you think in Central Oregon has been lost due to this shutdown? Like, do you have any rough idea of what that would be?
I think on a high side of that number, if you look immediately, let's say 3 months out, between, the closing of Sun River, Bersada, and some other ones, and business meetings lost, I bet you that number on the low side is at least $20 million worth of revenue directly to the resorts, then plus whatever, ancillary comes in. It could be as high as 30, 35 million would be my guess.
Wow. Yeah, that's significant. So let's see. So how else, what other industries do you guys see that you're dependent on, or that are dependent on you, basically looking at a supply chain? Like, how have you seen the whole supply chain disrupted?
From our side on the AV and sound and stuff, we also do retail. So there's a lot of times we'll sell to other DJs, production companies, installs, that sort of thing, products for their spaces and for their use. When China got hit with the whole COVID Corona deal, we started having supply chain issues then, with shipments being delayed, being held, and not making it here. Obviously now it's here, and everything going on there, we're seeing more of it, and to where items that are some of the more popular within our industry being out of stock now, going on probably 2-3 months. But at the same point in time, there's a lot of people not buying gear because they don't have jobs, they don't have income. So when we do swing back up, and if people do get loans and people start to buy gear, there could be a very large shortage there. For instance, on the streaming side, there's a couple products that are out that are great for streaming, a couple cameras and doing it well. They were sold out within 3 days of the first shutdowns coming, and now there's backlogs months long just to get basic things for doing upper end streaming and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's funny because, while most of us are not buying anything, because obviously we should be being, uh, should be taking care of and conservative out of our funds. That is what Courtney just said. Is I'm in a position where I've got to supply some gear to a client, and I it's one of the cameras we use is a Logitech C920, has a really good webcam, and resellers purchased them all up, and they're double the retail price if you go to Amazon. And I'm even seeing, some of the products that I normally would do for streaming that are 3-4 weeks out. And so I think, on the other end of it, if we get on the other side of it, I don't think retailers or the manufacturers are even, they're not gearing up because they know that people are sort of not buying those things either. And so our supply chain is going to be hammered, I think, for several months on the other side of this, as far as technical goods. I know Courtney was talking about one of his suppliers that I managed to buy a couple of things from him that were probably a couple of the last ones that probably were shipped into him. And I think our supply chain is going to be really difficult. And I don't know, Harrison, if you've seen that as well, just in your sort of world, but it's just an interesting world when it comes to tech stuff right now, for sure.
Yeah, we've seen the same thing, and our orders have dried up. But even if they didn't, we wouldn't be able to do anything until May. So kind of doesn't really matter. So we're getting near the end here. What would you want to say to your political leaders, to Kate Brown or Donald Trump, if you had them right in front of you? What would you say?
I feel that that's a sort of a, I'm gonna go first because I'll let everybody else compose their thoughts so they can go. It's funny. I'm looking at a monitor. I'll show the back. It's everybody can see, like, yeah, you can see everybody over here, so I can see everybody's reaction at the same time. But for me, it's been interesting because I've actually gotten to work with a couple of them, and I can't speak to the high level. I can only speak to the local level. And I know that at least on our local level, they're trying their darndest. But unfortunately, we've got, what people don't understand a lot of times is that, oh, great, well, this CARES Act passed. Well, then it goes to the state level, and the state level has to figure out, well, what do we do? And which means that the Oregon, legislature has to meet to pass a bill so that it can be signed by Governor Brown, so that then the money can get to us. So politics is sort of a game right now, and I do know on a local level we have, Sherry Halt is working pretty hard, and there's several other people, to make sure that as soon as the money gets there, it's there. I try to stay out of the national politics just because I could probably get in hot water either way. If I I could say one thing, one person could do. So I just hope that obviously that those people are making their best decisions based on the most input as possible. That's all I have to say.
Oh, wow.
The politician in the group is never afraid to talk politics. So.
Well, that would be you, Carrie. So I mean, there you go.
I sort of alluded to this earlier, but I honestly feel like the best thing that could happen right now at either the state level or the federal level would be to just halt all debt payments. So if they halted them across the entire supply chain, so mortgages, leases, bank loans, financing, if they just halted all debt payments for 60 days, I feel like there would be a huge amount of relief without having to try to move money around the system. So that's one. Two is that, I hope that the federal government and state government do a good job of balancing supporting essential businesses and kind of non-essential businesses, which I think a lot of us in the event industry would fall into. It's critical that we prop up our banks and airlines and hospitals, but it's also critical to community and joy and a life worth living that we prop up the arts and the events and those kinds of things. And so I hope that they don't forget about those industries. And then third, I'm always thinking about equity. So how are we doing even more for the most vulnerable among us? And so, again, it's easy to prop up the big industries, but the really small businesses, especially those led by women or veterans, or folks that already struggle to keep up in our economy, I hope that our politicians keep them top of mind.
Yeah, I would like to, I kind of echo Matt's sentiment a little bit, talking about Cherry Health and some of our local politics. I've been on the phone with them, and I know that they're working hard, and they're working, believe it or not, both sides of the aisle are working together, and to keep political beliefs out of it. But I'd like to see a little more flexibility and a little more urgency out of our, state politicians, especially now that you've seen some of the CARES Act. I mean, I get phone calls from employees daily who are like, hey, my unemployment's been denied. It's, not going through, or it's been 2 weeks and I haven't heard anything. And these are our servers that make minimum wage plus gratuity, right? So, I mean, they've lost all sources of their income across the board, or our banquet servers that are that way, or housekeepers. I would like to see a little urgency kind of moving forward from the state level, so that way we can make sure we can take care of our people. I know that everybody else has people they want to see taken care of. So for me, it's a little more action. And I realize there's, tape and everything to get through, but a little more urgency would be nice to see.
Yeah, I tend to share the belief that I hate politics. I don't mind being hired to help politicians do sound, but I try to stay away from politics as much as possible. I fill in my box on the thing and kind of go forward. The biggest thing that I would love to see is better communication. There's a lot of advocates locally, county, state, that are trying to disseminate messages down through the various levels, and they're behind. So it's a struggle when you're looking to these people who are providing updates, and they're saying, hey, you got to do this, hey, you got to do that. Well, that program's already shifted. And so when you're fighting to keep your business alive and try to get your employees back and try to keep things moving forward, you're doing your best to stay on top of all that and sidestep all the BS and the pandering and the whatever, and get to the details. And so when you're being told one thing, but that's already 3 days old, I know it's moving fast and I get that, but realistically, should be a singular focus at this point of this and getting us through this and helping out business and employees, and leave all the other political crap for later. It's a time to just have a singular focus, get over your agendas, and get us the information and help this thing move forward.
Carrie began something early on, and there's a kind of a mix here between tactical and strategic planning. And one of the things we were talking about early on was the amount of cash reserves a business has, or an emergency fund that a person has. We have to think about our government having that as well, where one of the reasons why you're seeing a lot of delayed response at all levels of our government is we weren't ready, or we disbanded, or we became complacent in a few areas at all levels, local and federal. And when a true disaster hit, sure, we can talk about all day long about how things were unprecedented, but there is some precedent to this, and having that rainy day fund, or having that team that is on standby for a pandemic. I benefit from a volunteer role with the Sheriff's Department and disaster aid, working from both California and Oregon. And every year we practice about pandemic outbreaks. We practice about tsunamis, earthquakes, and so on. And for me, when I see the planning systems or the budgets get cut because we're in a good time, or we haven't had a pandemic, a tsunami, an earthquake, so forth, it frustrates me, because this, unfortunately, is a great example of we weren't ready for it and we weren't funded. So my answer, I think, is very simply, we need to remember that those rainy day funds that many of us are willing to put extra money and taxes and support into, they need to be kept. Just because we're in high times or fat times, this is a horrible example of what happens when the bottom falls out. And it will get better. There's a tremendous amount of hope. I mean, I'm not this isn't the first one. It's we'll get through this, and we're resilient. We're resilient as humans. But this is impactful, and for those that can't eat tomorrow, they need a tactical response. For those that are doing business planning and preparing to hire and make sure the economy can keep running, no different than Bend and Central Oregon shifted from a very tourist-driven environment or specific months. They've been able to adapt to a year-round. This is an example where we have to approach that from a disaster planning and business perspective. I brought the food one up. I was going to say one thing I've noticed that I like here about Bend, the head of the Small Business Administration here in Central Oregon was leading a food bank giveaway recently and was obviously connecting back with the very definition of the at-risk and at-need community here for a very tactical response, yet this is the same person that is going to be helping administer many of these SBA loans that these organizations locally are going to be applying for. So I'm very comfortable that he's going to have a good perspective to all levels. I also love to see more direct involvement and awareness from our politicians.
Yeah, well, that's a good word. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Carrie, thank you for all the lovely backgrounds that were shifting. That was fantastic. Anyway, so this has been a great conversation. City Club working with Hand in Hand Productions. And just want to once again thank our platinum sponsors, Brooks Resources, St. Charles Health Systems. And also, I think just like Scott was saying, just ending on a word of hope. Like, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through it together. Hopefully you have a support system that can help. But anyway, I'm excited to see what Central Oregon does and how we will rally. And anyway, we have like 1 minute, any last things that locals can do to help, or maybe it's when the ban is lifted, like how could locals respond that would really help you guys out?
I do think there's just one thing that I'd like to say specific to this industry, which is that there are some events that will have to be canceled in which the event producer will not be able to provide a refund or a full refund. And that's really hard for people. But to understand that event producers have expenses all year round, overhead and advertising and staff to put on events, and that it's not just about the expense of the actual event itself. So just asking for people's grace as they understand that, event producers won't always be able to refund all their money if the event isn't produced.
I'd like to say, come out, visit your favorite restaurant when it's all said and done, right? Because everyone's going to be ready to get back to work full time. I know everyone's getting tired of cooking. I know personally, my wife is as well. So do that. And then when it comes to your travel plans, look, don't cancel them, just postpone them and rebook them down the road. So it's a whole cycle that goes round and round. And like Harrison said and Scott said, we'll all get through this together. Just remember to check in on anyone that works for you or with you or an old friend that you haven't talked to in a long time and make sure they're doing okay right now.
Yeah, and to echo, reschedule, be ready, but keep your butts at home for a while. Like, let's just get through this, stay home, chill out, get all of the cooking out of your system, learn some new recipes. And to David's point, then when this lifts, let's go out and eat and drink and party and have fun. But for the time being, just kick it at home. Get good at Zoom, learn to do backgrounds like Carrie. Like, let's just, let's get through this. We got to flatten it. We got to roll through it. We got to keep everybody protected. But at the other side, let's just pent it up and party when we hit the other side of this thing.
Awesome. Well, with that, thank you guys so much for joining us. We will see you next week. We'll be doing these at 2:00 on Wednesdays, and hope to see you next week.
You guys are clear.